Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday, September 9th, 2022. I am Andy Steele, the operations manager here at AE 911 Truth. And as you can see behind me, the event is Forbidden Truth. This is our 21st anniversary event. I'm very excited to be joining you tonight, as well as joining all of these great people that are going to be coming to you in the next 4 hours. Who are those people going to be? Well, we're going to be joined by AE 911 Truth CEO Roland. He's going to be sharing a few words and thoughts with you. We're going to be seeing Matt Campbell, 911 family member who lost his brother Geoff Campbell on September 11th. He'll be talking, I believe, about the inquest, so you'll have to see that. Ted Walter, a director of strategy and development, will be speaking on revelations from the NIST request for correction. We're going to be joined by Brian Thompson, who I've never actually had on my podcast before. So this is going to be interesting for me personally. And he's going to be presenting his South Tower video analysis. John Cole will be here. He'll be talking about a paper that he's submitting. And also, we're going to be joined by AE board member Scott Grainger and Roland discussing an AE Building 7 pre-collapse study. All very interesting stuff for the people that dive into the nitty-gritty. But after all that, after we get done with the science section, we're going to be playing clips from AE 911 Truth's newest film. It's called 30 Seconds of Silence. You have to check it out. I actually just watched some of the clips for the first time about an hour ago. This is going to be a fascinating movie, but you're going to see that for yourself. We have plenty of time to get into that. And then after we play those clips for you, we're going to be doing a Q&A session with Dylan Avery himself, as well as John Cole, who is featured prominently in the film. And then we're not going to be done there, because AE 911 Truth is going to be announcing an exciting new project here at the end of the night. You're going to want to hear about it. I think people are going to be excited about it. I know I am. It's a brand new thing we've never done before. You're going to find out about it, but we're going to make you wait. We're going to be like that. So you have to stick around to the end of the show to find it out. Now, we wanted to start off tonight, of course, remembering why we all do this work. I mean, something drives us to get involved in a topic like this. You know, the controlled demolitions of the towers is not an easy issue to be an activist for. So for a lot of us, what we remember at this time are the family members. And we've gotten a lot of help from the 9/11 family members over the years. People that we do this for, they also help us in our mission. It's a symbiotic relationship. So we're going to take just a minute right now to remember them and highlight those family members who have helped us with our cause. So let's do that. All right. So as we proceed further tonight, we sent out a bulletin a number of months ago asking our supporters, why does 9/11 still matter to you? Now, for me, the reason was just flashed across the screen. All those people who lost loved ones on that day, all those people who died for the only crime that they committed was going to work that day. That was it. And we're still being lied to about how they died, the circumstances under which they died. They deserve that justice. But for every single person, that reason is different. That's why we wanted to hear from them. And the response was overwhelming. We got like 900 responses. I couldn't even keep up with all of them. We did our best to gather them all. I grabbed a a few of them, but there's an entire spreadsheet somewhere here on my hard drive that has everybody's responses. We're going to be referencing those throughout the years on my show, 9/11 Freefall, here at AE 9/11 Truth. Some great insights, some great thoughts from our supporters out there. We want to thank you all for doing that. What we did, though, in order to honor this whole concept of why 9/11 still matters to you, is we wanted to make a video to capture it. And we invited some of our supporters who wrote in and to participate in making this video. So before we get all of our guests on and everything, we're going to play that for you. This is about 3 minutes long, but listen to some of the things they say and also some of the imagery. And I think it captures exactly what this time of the year is all about for people in this audience.
9/11 was probably the most painstakingly and effectively produced perception management project in the long, dark history of governmental malfeasance and corruption. Unless the malefactors are exposed, they'll always win.
In these times of deliberate distortion of the truth, when our society has seemingly lost its moral compass and ethics are being eroded, we need to keep our minds clear and our innate ability to discern reality from fiction fully functioning.
There are conspiracy theories, lies, and disinformation. However, when the official explanation of a catastrophic event defies the laws of physics and also denies the properties of the world's strongest materials, you know that you're being lied to by the official story.
"9/11 was the first situation where it was so obvious to me that an engineering organisation, that is NIST, was lying to the American public and to the world."
To me, 9/11 represents a mass betrayal of those things we hold dear and true about this great nation.
Many people died, were injured, and so much emotional pain was caused. This crime was carried out with forethought, intent, and malice.
With unremitting purpose and courage, you are the single organization capable of formally challenging the network of lies, with not one, not 10, not 100, but thousands of professional people not interested in political purposes, but committed to revealing the scientific truth.
All right, so we're going to get the ball rolling on our great list of guests tonight with the CEO of AE 9/11 Truth, Roland Engel. Roland is a civil engineer with over 50 years of experience, and even before becoming the CEO, he demonstrated his leadership by serving on the board and starting Project Due Diligence, which is getting presentations like the ones you're going to be seeing tonight, only longer, in front of professional organizations, their branches all over the country. Very important work that they are doing and a lot of headway they are making there. He's also served in the U.S. Army Special Forces, and I'll just say for myself, it's an honor to work for him. So I'm going to bring Roland on in. Roland, the floor is all yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Andy.
Oops.
Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, wherever in the world you are watching this show. We're grateful to have you here, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to get our message out to all of you and to the entire world. 21 years have passed since the events of September 11th, 2001, and yet we still don't have answers. We still don't have answers to pertinent questions about what really happened. Much of the evidence, as soon as the event occurred, as soon as they stopped looking for survivors within a week or so, the city of New York stepped in and began to scrub the site of most of the evidence. It was packed on ships to Steele and sold to China for recycling, and it was thus lost for any forensic investigation. Only a few hundred, 236 pieces of steel were saved from the entire 100 tons of steel from the Twin Towers and Building 7. So most of the evidence was lost. We still had, however, the video evidence and the evidence of eyewitnesses and first responders. 1 year later, the Congress, which was under tremendous pressure from the families of the people that had died to find out what had happened and why the buildings had collapsed, passed the National Construction Safety Team Act and empowered the director of the National Institute of Standards and Technology to conduct investigations and report back on their findings as to why the 3 towers at the World Trade Center had collapsed that day. So NIST initiated that investigation in 2002, and they didn't publish a report on the Twin Towers until December of 2005, some 3 years later. And for those of us in the building professions, we looked at that report very carefully, all 10,000 pages of it, those of us who were concerned. And we were concerned for a very good reason. We knew that NIST was an arm of the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Commerce is an arm of the executive branch of government. But it was exactly the executive branch of government that failed to protect us on that day. And so we saw that there was an inherent conflict of interest in having an arm of the executive branch conduct the investigation into what had happened. That's a sort of a basic principle of law. You don't involve somebody that was a party to a crime or in some way involved in it, conducting the investigation. So we were concerned that that report would not be accurate, and in fact, we found numerous flaws with the report on the Twin Towers. So in 2006, an architect by the name of Richard Gage founded Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And that organization began looking into the inferences and the evidence of the report as it was published by NIST. In 2008, NIST published another report on the collapse of Building 7, the 3rd tower that had come down that day, and the report was also found to be deficient by those of us that looked into it. So we began to gather evidence, talk to other researchers, and we eventually paid for another report on the collapse of Building 7 to be conducted by the University of Alaska at Fairbanks under the guidance of Professor Leroy Halsey. And the Halsey report came out in 2018, and they found that they could not replicate the conclusions of the NIST report on the collapse of Building 7. So this is a problem. They found many anomalies in the report, omissions, defiance of the laws of physics, and so on. And so we began to question NIST and ask them to discuss with us the differences between the findings of the UAF report and the NIST report. NIST refused to do so. And so that was one problem. But a bigger problem was the fact that our professional organizations that speak for us on the national stage, that is the American Society of Civil Engineers, the American Institute of Architects, the National Society of Professional Engineers, the National Council for Structural Engineering Associations, all these organizations, the leadership came down in support of NIST and said that the studies that NIST had conducted were accurate and complete, and there didn't need to be any further discussion of them. So those of us who disagreed with that decision had to begin another tactic. And so we formed here at AE 911 Truth, we formed Project Due Diligence, and we trained a team of engineers from around the country and some in Europe, and with the information that we had collected, and we took that information out and began to present it to the local branches and chapters of the professional organizations. And what we found was that the engineers that heard what we had to say unanimously agreed that we had sufficient information of quality to ask for a new investigation, because the investigation conducted by NIST did not meet our professional standards. So that has been our reaction from the rank and file of our profession, and it is in direct contradiction to the position of our leadership. So we have a problem within our professional organization in that the government is saying that our profession supports them. We have found that our profession does not support them, but there are elements within our leadership that do. So we are attempting to put pressure on those leaders to come around to the opinion that a new investigation is necessary. So you can see our analysis actually put together in a more recent video that we put together called Critical Decisions That Derailed the World Trade Center Investigation of Building 7. And that's at ae911truth.org/CPD, if you want to look into that further. So using that information, we are now going to begin our outreach to persons that were involved in the official investigations. We believe most of them were honest, doing their job properly, but somehow in the process of producing those reports, their investigation was derailed. So in addition to that, we are working in the public arena, and that's you're seeing the videos and other information reports that we produced that we publish on our website. We've taken out billboards, we've had campaigns, we have our personnel making appearances in the alternative media. So we do have a public outreach. We know that public opinion is essential for us to gain the kind of momentum we need to force a new investigation. We're also working in the legal arena. We're challenging the NIST refusal to dialogue with us. We've taken them to court. The courts at the lower level have ruled in their favor, coming up with the amazing conclusion that even though we represent 3,500 building professionals, we don't have standing to question their decisions. And they even went further and said that there's no obligation for the government to issue truthful reports. So we're challenging that at the appellate level in the District of Columbia appellate courts. We've also submitted information to the Attorney General in the Southern District of New York, and we've asked that person to present the evidence that we have of controlled demolitions to the grand jury as a crime was committed in their district on September 11th. The Attorney General has refused to present that information to a grand jury, so this has set up a unique challenge that we have brought to the courts to ask, in fact, isn't it a fact or a point of law that the Attorney General is required to present evidence of a crime to a grand jury when he has knowledge of it. And so that is also before the courts. In addition to that, we have the Campbell case, and I'll be introducing Matt Campbell to you in just a minute. He's got information related to the court, related to his brother's death on September 11th. I'd like to close with a fundraising appeal. We need support. These are very difficult times. All the nonprofits uniformly are reporting difficulty raising money. There's so much uncertainty in the world with pandemics, wars, inflation, and other events that are of great concern to every one of us. And it's easy to forget that there are ongoing projects that need our support. So I'm asking each one of you today to open your hearts and open your bank accounts and your wallets, and please contribute to AE 9/11 Truth. We are making progress. I know it's slow and it's painful, but that's the nature of the investigation that we're conducting. We can't proceed unless we're on firm ground, and we can't do that without research. It takes time, it takes money. And I want to say that without our great staff and the volunteers that work with us, we wouldn't be able to accomplish what we've accomplished so far. And so they deserve our great appreciation and our support. And I also want to thank the ongoing support of you, the donors, that have made this possible up until now. We get no money from the government. We get no money from any corporate source that could possibly compromise our mission. So we depend upon you. Sustaining support in all amounts on a monthly basis would be the best possible solution for us, for as many of you as possible. If each of you gave a little, there's tens of thousands that we could operate without having to fear for our future existence. So please consider giving us a donation and any other way you can support us. So now I'm going to cease my comments and introduce Matt Campbell to you. Matt, it's my pleasure to introduce Matt. He is the brother of Geoff Campbell, who lost his life in the North Tower on September the 11th. He's worked with us for a number of years. He appeared in our film, The Unspeakable, a large portion of which was documented his and his family's efforts to achieve a new inquest into Geoff's death. So thank you for coming on tonight, Matt, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Roland. Yeah, here we are, another anniversary. 21 years ago, my brother Geoff was murdered on live TV. He didn't usually work at the World Trade Center. He worked for Reuters, which was up in Midtown. But that day he was attending the Risk Waters conference on the 106th floor of the North Tower. Since then, and over the years, and I mean decades now, small fragments of his body, just sort of 3%, has been identified and returned to us. We're talking a few small bones and parts of his face and his head. I know that the identification efforts still continue at the office of the chief medical examiner in New York. But, you know, for those of you that don't know, you know, there's still 1,106 people. Some 40% of those that died at the World Trade Center that still aren't identified, and their remains haven't been returned to their loved ones. You know, approximately a third of those 22,000 fragments that were recovered remain unidentified, and 5,000 of those are smaller than an inch. These are statistics that still make me shake my head in disbelief. I first started questioning the official narrative way back in October 2001, and it's been what seems a very long journey. And this time last year, thanks to supporters who generously donated the legal fees that we needed, we submitted an application to the UK Attorney General to try and reopen my brother's inquest. And for those who don't know, an inquest in the UK is an investigation designed to find out, basic stuff like who the deceased was, where they were, and when they died. But more importantly, how, meaning, by what means did they die? Now, the UK coroner concluded that Geoff's death was caused by the impact of American Airlines Flight 11, causing the North Tower to collapse, resulting in Geoff's death. That's something that, I want to challenge. And under Section 13 of the 1988 Coroners Act, there is a mechanism which allows family members like ourselves to petition the Attorney General to apply to the High Court for a fresh inquest. Now, our grounds for a new inquest are essentially, I guess, two areas that we're challenging on, or questions that need to be dealt with by the Attorney General, and that is an insufficiency of inquiry and new evidence which was not heard at the original inquest, which was held in 2013. Now, the transcript of the 2013 inquest plainly shows that no evidence was heard to the cause of the North Tower's destruction. Thus, the coroner's conclusion or findings that the plane caused the North Tower's destruction and ultimately Geoff's death is unsupported. We also found out in February this year, through the release of, it was previously marked exempt from disclosure. It was a report prepared by the London Metropolitan Police and like the counter-terrorism branch of them. That report only contained 2 pages in the form of a very basic narrative summary covering the hijackings and the tower's destruction. And our barrister Nick Stanage, pointed out in a communication to the Attorney General's office shortly afterwards that the police report contained no evidence or even an assertion as to what caused the destruction of the North Tower and thus Geoff's death. And to be clear, the coroner at the 2013 inquest did not hear or state any evidence as to the cause of death, and this is all required under UK law. On the second sort of area that we're challenging on, which is new evidence, we submitted a 2,500 page application, which contained a lot of evidence which was not heard at the original inquest. And obviously a substantial chunk of that application is evidence of explosives and incendiaries being used to bring all 3 towers down. The third thing that the Attorney General needs to consider when looking at our application is they need to satisfy this question, which is it necessary or desirable in the interests of justice that a fresh inquest should be held? And the UK case law is quite clear on this, that a family's wish for a fresh inquest is given considerable weight because basically a new inquest may be desirable simply because a family member, in this case it's all of us, requests it. So they're the 3 things that we're petitioning the Attorney General on. I'm sure a lot of you maybe have noticed that there's been quite a lot of stuff going on in the UK this week, not least the passing of the Queen yesterday. But also we've had a change of prime minister, and that in turn has caused a change of the cabinet. And so the previous Attorney General, Suella Braverman, is now the Home Secretary, and she in turn has been replaced by Michael Ellis, who I guess will stay in that position until, whilst the Conservatives are still in government. Michael Ellis is actually a member of Parliament from the region where Geoff and I grew up as kids. I mean, none of these developments should affect the legal process in assessing our case, but I said there's a lot been going on this week. Having said it shouldn't change anything, after not hearing from the Attorney General's office probably since May, June this year, I found it kind of odd, but also encouraging that we actually received a communication from them this very afternoon. Albeit it was a very routine admin matter, at least I know that it's still being actively looked at, the application that is. The wheels of justice may turn very slowly, but at least we know they haven't sort of rusted up completely. I am personally confident that the Attorney General will grant his authority to reopen Geoff's inquest. Actually, I'll probably be astonished if that's not the case. Because I believe that our case is very strong. And once that authority is granted, the next stop is the High Court, where we will need support from our barrister again, and to represent us in ensuring that the High Court orders that the original inquest is quashed and a new one is ordered. And that new inquest would actually be held at the original Coroner's Court, which is the West London Coroner's Court, and where I believe that finally evidence of controlled demolition and what ultimately killed my brother will be heard. I remain very hopeful, and I hope we hear in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I know a lot of people's hopes and prayers are riding with you. And so many people have questions about this event, and people who lost loved ones, but so few of them stand up and stick their neck out and do all of that great work. So we very much appreciate you here at AE. And I know all the people out in the audience appreciate you as well. So good luck and good night. I know it's late there.
Cheers, Andy. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we are going to get technical now. We're going to start talking about some of that science, which is what we do all the time here at AE 911 Truth. But we've got some new research out there and some stuff that we haven't really highlighted a lot of before. And we're going to be beginning with Brian Thompson. Now, Brian has an undergraduate degree in civil engineering from Marquette University and a master's degree in fire protection engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. He holds a professional licenses in both fire protection engineering and civil engineering in multiple states, and he practices in fire protection engineering design and consulting. Where is he? There he is. Let's bring him on in. Brian, thank you for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Good to be here.
So you have the floor.
Very good. Thank you. So a year ago, for the 20th anniversary, I was putting together a presentation, and I had told the audience it was going to involve a look at all three towers, and I found not much information on Tower 2. So in order to fulfill my promise, I set out to try and do a preliminary analysis of Tower 2. And what I learned last year has sort of progressed into a little deeper dive, and there is still more work to do, but I'm happy to share what I have found regarding the tilting top of Tower 2. So to set the context, we'll just start with a video clip. I've sped it up to 5 times the speed just for the sake of time. So what we'll see when we watch is we've got Tower 1 and Tower 2. There will be a glimpse of daylight as the smoke clears early in the video, just to give us perspective on how high we are in the towers here. And of course, the impact zone is in this general area. We'll see some activity in this location on the building leading up to the collapse. And then when the collapse initiates, we'll see some activity in this area as well. So those are the things to kind of keep in mind as we roll the tape here. So again, this is 5 times the speed, but we're starting to see that activity at the lower corner of the impact zone. And then as the collapse initiates in the center of the area, we'll see some other unique characteristics that we'll delve into. So it was pretty quick. You might have missed it. So let's now focus on just that collapse segment. And here it is at regular speed. So again, we'll have Tower 1 and Tower 2. We've got the collapse, or the impact zone, excuse me, the area of focus where collapse initiates, and then some subsequent activity in the center of the tower, and we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, that was regular speed, but it was still pretty quick. So here we'll run it at half speed. Okay, and see if you can catch some of those nuances we're looking for. So I'll rewind it and we'll watch that again, because there's a few spots to look at the same time. So we're looking, basically there's kind of a bright spot in the middle of the tower above the impact zone. And if you watch kind of that region of the tape as it plays, you'll start to see some of the things that we'll be looking at in more detail. All right, so here's the framework of the analysis that I undertook. Was basically, there is a distinct corner of the building that's got a nice straight white line. And so we can trace that up. And I placed my line where it aligns with kind of the dark edge of the building and the white face, because it's a very broad line and I'm trying to kind of dial it in there. I am an engineer. So now we'll step through video frames as we trace that corner. So basically I find the white line, I trace it down, and we just repeat that process, stepping through. And here we're just going frame by frame. But what we'll see is as the tower starts to tilt, we're able to follow the line to some degree. And then we get to a point where there seems to be a disconnect. We can see the top portion of the line of that corner of the building, and then the bottom portion no longer lines up. So I can chase the bottom up, but I find that it also doesn't align with the top of the building. So there's something happening to this tilting top. In addition to the collapse that's occurring in that impact zone, there's something happening higher in the tower. Okay, so now we're just going to keep stepping through, and again, the alignment wasn't caused by some misalignment of my markings. We're seeing that, gosh, each time we step the frame, there's a disconnect. And so I ran this process, and these are not quite every frame, but what we'll then see is in this location, there's sort of a warm spot there, but now all of a sudden, look, there's a bright white spot that's occurring well above the impact zone and in the vicinity of this location where what I characterize as a kink is occurring in this tilting top of Tower 2. And so there's that bright white spot, and it is basically at the base of this discontinuity that we see in that corner of the building. And we can continue tracking this, and we can see that, you know, as much as we extend these lines, they're not lining up. In fact, it appears that they're even perhaps further apart than they were when we first started looking at this. So something is happening that's causing the top of the tower to separate into two segments. And as we continue to watch how this can be traced, we end up starting to also notice that the red line seems to be falling and the yellow line seems to be staying in place. And so when we take that together, we'll go to this next slide here, and we'll just lay all of those trackers over the top of each other. So starting with the original red line that we had at the beginning, and then dropping down to where we saw the motion of that red, we can do the same thing with the yellow and see that the yellow is much tighter alignment. So of course, what can we conclude from this? Well, we can see that there are two distinct tilting top segments of Tower 2. But this is just one two-dimensional perspective. The top is moving in three dimensions. It's not perfectly, perpendicular to our screen. So there's, opportunity to try and better quantify the degree of variation between those top segments, and also then opportunity to try and quantify the rate of descent of the top segment and lower segment of Tower 2. So those are the interesting things I discovered with the tilting top of Tower 2.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Ted told me that you had some fascinating research here, and I'm just digesting it right now as I'm sitting watching this. It must have taken a lot of tedious effort to look into that. So thank you for doing all of that work and for showing up here tonight. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So our next guest here is a person that to this audience probably doesn't need much of an introduction. This is John Cole. He's a professional civil engineer who is registered in Connecticut, Florida, and New Hampshire. He has over 3 decades of experience in civil engineering and construction management, including building, bridge, utility, and infrastructure design. He's famous for his series of videos documenting his 9/11/World Trade Center related experiments, including this one I found personally fascinating. He was able to construct what he called a thermitic box cutter using thermite and some materials that he found. And he showed that a properly made device could be constructed to slice through structural steel. So if you haven't checked out his videos, I definitely recommend it. It's all backyard experiments, but it supports our cause very well. Well, tonight he's going to be talking about a new paper of his. So let's go ahead and add him into the stream here. Hello, John.
Hi, Andy. How you doing? Thanks.
Well, let me go ahead and get your presentation up.
Okay.
There you go. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been involved in this truth movement for quite a while, actually, back since early 2008. And I did my experiment videos and the Great Thermite Debate and all that stuff. I've kind of done some recent stuff. Actually, I kind of eased out of 9/11 for a while. Then I'm sort of getting pulled back into it now. I'm getting interested again in it because I think it's a very important issue, especially with all the things going on today. And so I've done some updated recent research. And I call this, I only have 7 slides to go through. I call this the disappearing top block and the spire's single column. Now, for some background, I'm sure the vast majority of your listeners are well aware of the history of the NIST investigations. Roland touched on it earlier tonight. But NIST was tasked by the US Congress to, quote, determine why and how WTC-1 and WTC-2 collapsed following the initial impacts of the aircraft. Well, they did a multi-million-dollar study, and they took, I don't know, a year and a half. I think Roland mentioned that. But interesting, after thousands and thousands of pages, they stopped their study at collapse initiation, ignoring the actual collapse itself. And they simply concluded, they had a couple of concluding comments. One of them was just that global collapse then ensued, as if it was inevitable that it was going to happen. How it ensued, they didn't exactly explain. As a matter of fact, later on, NIST said that they were, quote, unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. That's kind of odd. Here we have something that killed, 2,800 souls, and they weren't able to provide a full explanation of the collapse, and they're the experts. They also said prior to this study, the key theory at the time that was proposed by PBS, NOVA, all the science stations, ASCE, was called the pancake type collapse, a progressive floor by floor pancake collapse. Well, surprisingly, NIST said that they were unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. It's also a little odd. So NIST never proposed their own collapse theory. They did support what's called a crush down, crush up theory proposed by a couple of professors, Lay and Bazant, with a mathematical paper that was developed through a number of years, describing how the upper, smaller top block of the floors, and that's what Brian was just talking about in Building 2, how they crushed down the larger structure below. And then once it got done crushing that larger structure below, once it hit bottom, those floors automatically crushed themselves back up. So that's really the current theory that everybody likes to throw out. They like to throw out this mathematical paper. But let's take a look at some of the key assumptions in that paper and talk about them. This right here is their assumed two-phase collapse process. This is from their paper. This came out in 2007. Initially, it came out a couple days after 9/11, but it was edited and updated over the years. There was one in 2007, and there's another one that just came out, by the way. But they had a two-phase collapse process. The first phase they called the crush down phase, where this smaller top floor area, in Tower 1, it was like the top 12 or 13 floors. And in Tower 2, as Brian pointed out, it was larger. It was maybe twice as big. But this basically shows Tower 1, where this small upper top floor started dropping down. This would be after the NIST report concluded. This is kind of continuing on from the NIST report by these private professors. This top block crushed down this larger, colder, stronger block and destroyed it all the way down to the ground. And here is this top block here into basically crushed up rubble. And then when this top block hit ground zero, if you will, then this top block, according to their mathematical equations, it crushed itself back up in the crush up phase. So when all was said and done, there was just a small pile of rubble here. So again, they had a two-phase crush down, crush up phase. Now, they also put together a motion history graph for the entire collapse duration. So in their paper, they broke down, they have two graphs, and these look complicated, but they're not. Basically, this is the North Tower right here that I'm circling here. And this blue line here is just nothing more than the elevation observed of the top corner of the tower. And as time goes by, as the seconds tick by, of course, the top elevation starts dropping. And it drops down around 12.4 seconds. That's the end of their crush down phase. That means the top roof is all the way down. And then it reverses in the last few seconds into the crush up phase. So the total elapsed time, and they say it's the entire collapse duration, not partial. The whole building was down in about somewhere under 15 seconds. Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what they had here and take a peek at how those towers fell. Fortunately, we have a lot of videos of this, so we can look at this thing. This is the North Tower. I'm going to play this clip. I'm going to start through by playing it kind of piece by piece, and I'm going to play the whole thing for everybody. It's only about 30 seconds long. So here's the North Tower just before the collapse. Here comes the top block down, the top floors, and right about there, after about 3 to 4 seconds, we can't see that top block anymore. It's gone. Now, what they're saying in their paper is that, well, that top block must just be hidden behind all that smoke and debris there. So that's what I call stage one, where I call it the top block, the visible top block. From there, we see a whole bunch of lateral ejections. Now I'm going to stop it here. All this material is being blown. Is it over the top of the lower colder core, the lower colder tower? No, it's not. It's being blown away outside of the lower tower. So if it's being blown away, there's an awful lot of mass there. I don't know how much it is, but there's an awful lot of mass that cannot even impact the lower tower. So any mathematical equations needs really to net out that mass so it doesn't impact the lower structure if they're going to use their math. So here we go. It's continuing down in what I call the lateral phase. Now, right about here, we're just starting to see this little fuzzy column sticking up. And we're going to see a lot more of that in the next few seconds. That is a top internal core column. Okay, and as we continue the rest of stage two, what I call stage two, okay, now stage two is down right about now. And there was a north wind that day, kind of blew the smoke and the dust away. So we have a pretty good visual of something still standing there. It's a significant portion of the tower. It's the whole central core. And that's about 60 floors high, according to NIST. It's pretty high. It's a big structure. There's other pictures showing it. There's more depth to it, and they're all interlaced together. Well, that structure, it's a freestanding structure. It's not a building, but it's part of the structure. That stands for another full 15 or more seconds. Okay, and that's just standing there. There's no motion to about, like I say, about another 15 seconds. And then here's this top column right here. Again, there's nothing on top of it now. Then the whole central core starts dropping straight down. It's not turning to dust. It's dropping straight down. And by the way, that central core, kind of what's known in the 9/11 world, that's called the spire. So if you hear me use the word spire, I'm talking about the central core columns that fell after the main event, if you will. So I'm just going to play this whole thing again. I'm not going to interrupt it this time. Here's stage one coming down. That's the top stage where we can see it. Here's stage two, the lateral stage. Okay. And then halfway through this, a little bit beyond halfway through this lateral stage, we start to see that central core column sticking up there. Now everything's down except for a significant amount here of the central core. That spire, looks like a church spire, is still standing. That stands again for 15 seconds during stage three, what I call stage three. And then finally, the last 3 seconds, that drops straight down, which should have been through its path of most resistance. It didn't tip over. I've cut plenty of trees down. I never see one go straight down like that. But that's what we observed. And by the way, you won't see this on TV anymore during the 9/11 anniversaries. They only show, they don't show the collapse of the buildings. So that's what we actually observed. Now let's go back and let's look at their assumption in their paper versus the reality of what we all observed just now. So again, this is in their paper. This is their two-phase collapse process, the crush down and the crush up phase. And this is their assumed motion history for the entire collapse duration. Oh, actually, I just did this. I'm sorry. Let me jump ahead here. Okay, this is their crush down, crush up technical paper, 2 phases. Here's the crush down phase. Here's the crush up phase. Now, what did we just see? Well, I just saw actually a 4-stage event. Stage 1 was where we could actually see the visible roof. Stage 2 is my lateral destruction. And a ways through stage 2, we start to see that core spire sticking through there. And then finally, all this lateral destruction is down. And now we're just looking at stage 3, the standing core that lasts for about 3 seconds or so as a freestanding structure. And then stage 4 is the final falling core. So really, this is more appropriate, I think, based on observational evidence than what they had in the paper. They forgot to add the core column in their crush down as well as their crush up phase. They omitted it. So now let's take a look at their assumed motion history in their mathematical paper, in their crush down, crush up paper. They provided these 2 graphs. We just showed them before. This is what they provided, and their whole event was over in less than 15 seconds. And again, their title is Motion Histories of the Tower for the Entire Collapse Duration. Okay, and this is the North Tower and this is the South Tower. But in both cases, it's definitely less than 15 seconds. They're saying the entire building fell down. Well, we all just saw that the entire building was not down in 15 seconds. There was a significant amount of the core that was still standing. So I created another motion history as far as at least what I observed. I basically agree through their first portion of the falling building. This is my stage 1 where we can see the still some of the top block. This is stage 2 where you see that lateral ejection. Now this lateral ejection of debris kind of ends again down at that 14 or 15 second level, but overlapping that stage 2 is that standing core, okay? So that standing core didn't move down. It went straight across for another 15 seconds with no motion whatsoever. Again, it was a freestanding structure. And then in stage 4, in the last 3 seconds, we saw that remaining structure fall straight down well beyond 30 seconds. We kind of lose view, but we lose view after 30 seconds, but it had to have continued down. So in my opinion, the observed motion history for the entire collapse, this graph here that I developed is really more representative of what we actually observed. Now let's just take one more quick look. Let's take a look at this one tall column right here. This is that central core which stood for again, at least 15 to 20 seconds. This is the spire. Notice this one tall column here. First of all, it's straight. Notice also there used to be connected. Okay, this was all interconnected with floor systems in there. And when it was designed and built and standing less than a minute before, this was what we would have called a braced column. In other words, it was connected at the bottom. It was also connected by the floor trusses all the way up here, and maybe the elevator shafts, and it was connected at the top. So when engineers design columns, they look at what the bracing system is. And a braced column, something that's connected at the top and the bottom, can withhold more vertical load than an unbraced column. This is now, for these 15 seconds and the time before, this is now an unbraced column with it fixed on the bottom, what we call free floating at the top. And just using some engineer lingo, this is now it's a larger, what they call effective length for the column, and a larger slenderness ratio, which is really nothing more than saying that when it's in this kind of condition, this column can hold a lot less than it could when it was designed. Okay, so what? Well, the so what is, during that stage 2 of collapse, when this top block, alleged top block, was coming down, the downward vertical force on this column had to have been less, not more, than its original design capacity of this column. And the reason we know it had to be less is that if it was more, not only is the effective length longer, but we would have seen a buckled column. And we don't see a buckled column. That thing's pretty straight, as well as here's another freestanding column and another one. None of those columns were buckled. So the downward force had to be less during the collapse rather than more. So what can we conclude with this? Well, first of all, the 2-phase crush down, crush up scenario that was assumed in the model has got to be wrong, because we just observed 4 stages: the visible top stage, the lateral destruction stage, the standing core stage, and the falling core stage. The second thing is that the assumed duration of less than 15 seconds for total collapse, well, that's also wrong. Even NIST acknowledged, and I quote, "From video evidence, significant portions of the cores of both buildings, roughly 60 stories for WTC1 and 40 stories for WTC2, are known to have stood 15 to 25 seconds after collapse initiation before they too began to collapse." So they knew it. They knew it, but NIST didn't have to address it because they stopped their study prior to all this happening. The third thing we can conclude is that the top block of floors was not hidden in the dust, nor could it have remained intact all the way down to the ground. Well, why is it? It had to have been destroyed early on, because it could not have passed through the still standing core intact. How do you have a solid intact block dropping through a standing core? Well, it can't happen if it's intact. So the assumed crush down phase has to be wrong based on observation. The fourth thing is there could not have been any crush up phase either, because the spire columns that were standing for at least 15 seconds after the main event would have impeded any kind of crush up. And plus there wouldn't have been any solid block to crush up anyhow, because it couldn't have got through that core. Any downward force of the falling top must have been less, not more, than the design load of those spires that were still, or the still standing column. Or we would have seen it buckled and bent, but we didn't. It was straight. So the imposed load of the falling top block must have been disintegrated. It had to have been less during the event. So since that top block was destroyed, some unnatural force must have blown the building material laterally, because the top block couldn't have done it. It didn't exist, allowing those core columns to still stand and be exposed so we could all see it. So it had to have been blown outward. Also, some unnatural force must have been applied to the remaining core columns that were standing there for so long, causing those to accelerate straight down through its path of most resistance, because everything else of the building was gone. So there must have been some outside force that brought those down. Again, they didn't turn to dust. They fell straight down. Now, this crush down, crush up paper was originally submitted a couple days after, at least a simplified theory was submitted 2 days after 9/11, was quite remarkable. And it's been updated over the years. It was updated in 2007, and it's actually just been relatively recently updated. It's uploaded to the American Society of Civil Engineers. Well, I recently submitted what's called a discussion paper, in which I just kind of outlined some of these concerns that I had to the ASCE. So I'm hoping, by raising these concerns, this will allow them to go back to the authors and give them the opportunity to either correct their mathematics to address this additional information, these 4-stage collapse, or maybe even discard this crush down, crush up theory, like the pancake theory has been discarded by NIST. But because of this evidence here, this may explain why the NIST stopped their study before collapse even started, and why they couldn't explain the total collapse, and also why they were silent about the last 30 seconds. And that's it. That's all I have to present, Andy.
Well, John, I mean, I know you couldn't see me there in the waiting room, but I kind of sat there with my jaw dropped like this. I thought that that we have gathered everything that we can on this, and you just completely come in with a new thing. I'm familiar, of course, with the illustration by NIST of this top block coming down, and then just suddenly, inexplicably disappearing in the last panel. Quite hilariously, and I've seen the spire, but I've never put the two before here and realized that the spire completely disproves that illustration from NIST. It is amazing, and this is what I call an official story silver bullet. I've got my own list of them here, just certain points that immediately throws the investigation out the window, justifies rerunning of the analysis, a whole new report. This has now made the list. I'm actually going to watch this again later tonight, and we're definitely going to be talking more about this. So thank you so much for doing this research, presenting it here tonight. We're going to be talking to you a little bit later, so you'll be sticking around, but we appreciate you and everything you're doing. So I just want you to know that.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So fascinating. I have not seen these presentations yet, so I'm learning along with the audience here, and I'm going to be processing more of this later after this is done. So we've got another great researcher coming up here. I'm very familiar with him. We work together every single day. Of course, this is Ted Walter. He is the Director of Strategy and Development here at AE 9/11 Truth. He holds a Master of Public Policy degree from the University of California, Berkeley. Prior to his current role with AE, he was director of NYC CAN's 2014 High-Rise Safety Initiative. He was a volunteer campaign manager for AE's Rethink 9/11 campaign back in 2013. Very successful that was. And director of NYC CAN's 2009 ballot initiative. I mean, he's been working hard for 9/11 Truth for a number of years. He's also the lead author of the booklet Beyond Misinformation. I'd hold up my copy, but it's all damaged. They always reference it. And so because it's so informative, as well as World Trade Center physics and the request for correction to NIST World Trade Center 7 report, which he's going to be talking about tonight. So let me find Ted here. There he is. And let me show your presentation. And Ted, I'm going to disappear. You have the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. Thank you, Matt, for speaking. Thank you for what you and your family are doing. Thank you, John. Thank you, Brian. I want to say a couple words about John's analysis and his paper before I dive into what I'm going to talk about. I'm very excited about, just as Andy was, very excited about John's analysis and the discussion paper that he submitted very recently to the ASCE Journal of Structural Engineering, critiquing a paper that Zdeněk Bezant and Jialing Lei just published earlier this year in that journal. These are the same authors that published a paper a little over a decade ago, which we've been talking a lot about recently because one of our key volunteers, petition signers, Tony Zambodi, and another gentleman submitted a discussion paper critiquing the 2011 paper from Bezant. And what's interesting about their paper and John's paper is that they were looking at the very beginning of the North Tower's collapse, those first few seconds where there's no jolt, there's no observable deceleration. And they had Bezant in a checkmate because they showed that the input values in his analysis were incorrect. And if you use the right values for the weight of the upper structure and the resistance of the columns below, that in a normal gravity-driven collapse, the top would have slowed down. Because they had him in a checkmate, what essentially happened was the editors of the journal said, your paper is out of scope. And they have been fighting it ever since, and we are still fighting it in their paper. We have a 4-year ethics complaint that's still underway, and their paper is now being re-reviewed by the Journal of Engineering Mechanics. John has submitted this discussion to the Journal of Structural Engineering. He also has Bezant in a checkmate, and the beauty of it, the poetry, is that he's looking at the very end of the collapse, whereas Tony and Richard Johns were looking at the very beginning of the collapse. So there's yet this other period of observational evidence where the crush down, crush up theory doesn't work. And what's perhaps intriguing about this one is that, John doesn't have to get into any really complicated equations and formulas, which are Bezant and Lei's strong suit. He's just saying, pure logic, your model cannot account for this spire that remains standing. So we wish John the best, and we hope that I believe he has this crush down, crush up in a checkmate. Let's hope that the editors of the journal don't tip the chessboard over and allow this checkmate to actually take place, and see how Bezant and Lei will respond. I'm going to talk about another process where we're kind of going up against we have gone up against one of the main promoters of the official story of the Twin Towers destruction, that obviously being NIST. And we also had them in a checkmate in a number of ways, scientifically, with the request for correction that we submitted in the spring of 2020. We looked at 8 different areas of the NIST report that we argued NIST violated its own information quality standards. And so very methodically, we showed in about 100 pages what was wrong with NIST analysis and why it violated its information quality standards. As many of the listeners know, this process lasted for over a year. NIST finally declined our request for correction last year in the summer. We then filed a lawsuit trying to get NIST to go back and actually respond to our request for correction in a meaningful way. Unfortunately, NIST was able to evade this checkmate because the process of the request for correction is a fairly weak process. NIST pretty much had control over the process, and now the courts are saying things like we don't have a right to agencies like NIST publishing truthful information, and we don't have standing to actually challenge how NIST handled the request for correction. Even though this process, we're appealing this and we're fighting to have NIST go back, there's been a lot of value produced throughout this process by some of the original research that was done as we were putting the request for correction together, and also some of the things that NIST came back and said in response to our arguments. And so what I'm going to do, try to be brief, is touch on some of the biggest takeaways from this request for correction, a few of the things that were discovered in preparing it, and a few of the important things that NIST said in response. I'm going to skip the first part of the request for correction, where we really look in detail at the collapse initiation mechanism and the various ways in which NIST modeling was flawed, and the ways in which the initiating mechanism of the alleged initiating mechanism of the collapse would be impossible. It's very technical. It's very, very dry engineering stuff. I'm going to focus on some of the bigger takeaways that pretty much anybody should be able to understand. Perhaps the the biggest thing, the biggest thing that what this report, what's NIST report really centered on, was producing a model that they could then say explain looked like the actual collapse, that they were able to replicate the observed behavior. So what you're looking at right now is a key statement in the NIST report, and it's one that we really highlighted in the request for correction. And I'll read it for you. The global collapse analyses matched the observed behavior reasonably well. The global collapse analyses confirmed the leading collapse hypothesis. So based on that claim that their model matched the observed behavior, they said that their model confirmed their hypothesis. What we showed methodically in the request for correction was that it didn't. Now, there's two sides of this equation of matching the observed behavior. There's the model side, and then there's the actual observed behavior. NIST does something very important in mischaracterizing the observed behavior. And this was really first developed and discovered by David Chandler a little over a decade ago. And as part of this process of putting this request for correction together, David updated his analysis, and it was included in this request for correction. And so that's what I want to share, part of what I want to share with you here. Let me move to the next slide here. Okay, so NIST says, part of finally trying to explain the free fall of Building 7, NIST in their final report came out and said we have 3 stages of descent. The first one is this 1.75 second stage where the building moves a little bit slower than gravity. Then in stage 2, we get into actual free fall. And for purposes of tonight, the stage 3 is not that important. The building begins to slow down. These are the graphs that NIST produced in its report. What I'm ultimately going to say is that that first stage that NIST described is actually completely made up. And this was really confirmed through the analysis that was done for the request for correction. So NIST says in their report that they tracked the downward motion of the roof line by tracking the position of a single point near the center of the roof line. All right, so what you see here on the left is the displacement of the roof line. You see it like they have it starting to move in that first second and a half. And then they have their graph here where they have the stage 2 free fall. It's really important for NIST that they can say that the first part, that there was a build up to free fall, that free fall wasn't instantaneous, or it wasn't across the entire width of the building. In fact, that's what David Chandler discovered in doing and updating his analysis for this request for correction. Whereas NIST looks at one single point in the roof line near the center, what David did earlier in the beginning of his research, he was looking at one corner of the building. Eventually, he said, why am I doing that? Let me look at all 3. Let me look at the entire roof line. So he found a point in the one corner, the middle of the building, and the other corner, and he tracked it. This is the video that he used. I'll just play it really quickly. And for anybody who hasn't seen the collapse before, this is it. You'll see the east penthouse goes down first, about 7 seconds before the rest of the building. Okay. So these are the graphs that David produced in this analysis. What he found was, okay, in the middle of the building, there is a little bit of movement in the beginning. And that's what you're looking at in the middle. Here's the displacement. Here's the displacement, and here's the acceleration. But what he found then was that after about 1.75, 1.8 seconds after the time that NIST says the collapse initiated, all 3 points in the roof line go into free fall simultaneously within 1/10 of a second of each other. So there's a little bit movement of the middle. It just drops like a few feet, stops, drops another foot or 2, and then boom, the whole thing goes into free fall. So really the more accurate way to describe what happened was basically what I just said, a little bit of movement in the middle, and then the entire roof line goes into free fall at the same time. NIST confirms this for us. In figure 5, 201 of their report. This might be a little confusing at first, but basically what NIST has done is taken 2 photos and laid them on top of each other of Building 7. The first one is 5 seconds after the collapse of the east penthouse. The second one is 7.5 seconds. So they're 2.5 seconds apart. And when they overlay them and they do some sort of effect, and what they're looking at is the change in the placement of the building, the amount of downward motion. And that's represented by that really light colored sliver there. So that's where the building has actually moved from 5 seconds to 7.5 seconds after the East Penthouse collapse. What's interesting about 7.5 seconds is that is 0.6 seconds, so about a half second into the period of collapse where NIST says the collapse started. So over a half a second into the supposed collapse of the whole structure, or the exterior shell, most of the building hasn't moved. And this is essentially what David Chandler was showing in that analysis, was that the corners hadn't really moved yet. And NIST actually says in the report, interestingly, little movement of the northeast and northwest corners of the building is indicated. Exactly. So here I'm going to show you, and this is the other side of the equation now. We show that NIST mischaracterizes the collapse by saying that there's over a second and a half of gradual buildup. This is their actual model. I'm just going to let it run for anybody who hasn't seen it before. Okay. We took a really close look at their model, which hadn't really been done before this request for correction process. Sorry, one second. Okay. So here I overlaid 2 images from their model. The first one, which is really light, is right before the collapse begins, before the collapse of the East Penthouse. The second one, which is bolder, is right at the point where they say global collapse initiates, where the whole building starts to go down. As you can see, there's actually quite a bit of deformation to the building at the point where they say that the global collapse initiates. As we just saw, there's 0 movement or deformation to the building in the actual video. When the collapse, even after the collapse started, there was 0 movement or deformation of the corners. Now, they have an interesting claim in one of their FAQs. They say only in the later stages of the animation, after the initiation of global collapse, do the upper exterior wall deformations from the NIST analysis differ from the video images. Well, this overlay of their model shows that is categorically false. Actually, and this is a lot of deformation. It's maybe hard to see in this picture, but actually, like, the entire east side of the building has basically caved inwards. That's a lot of deformation, and that's before the collapse initiates. We pointed this out in their request for correction, and that's one of the many things that we asked them to change. And they came back in their response and literally just made the same claim again, as if we hadn't said anything in the request for correction. Other ways in which their model does not actually represent reproduce the observed collapse. I'm just going to read that what they themselves say: the building started to tip a little bit northwards and then settled back into its original line and fell nearly vertically. And that's represented here, if you can see, nearly vertically. The building fell straight down, according to NIST. Does NIST model show the building falling vertically, or a little bit to the north and then straight down? No, it actually shows the building tipping to the south. And one of the reasons why NIST probably cut off their model, about 1.8 seconds into the collapse, which was before free fall, is that they realized that the building was tipping over. And if it went any further, it would probably tip a lot more. Okay. So those are the big takeaways with NIST's failure to replicate the observed collapse. I'm going to quickly touch on a few other big takeaways that are easy for anybody to understand, because I think they're important for people to know. NIST says in their report that there were no witness reports of such a loud noise. Essentially, there was no reports of an explosion, because they did this analysis that showed that if there was an explosion capable of destroying a column in the building, it would be 140 decibels. That is a misleading analysis. They didn't assume any noise abatement. They didn't consider the use of thermite or something else that would be quieter. But in any case, they said essentially that there were no witness reports of explosions. The first clip I'm going to play really quickly, people might have heard before.
So I was just standing there, we were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder, turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was, well, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building and the windows all.
So on the day of 9/11, we had somebody say that there was a shock wave ripping through the building, cloud of thunder. Obviously, other people later into the future described explosions. Craig Bartmer, the NYPD officer. But as we were, the day that we submitted the appeal of NIST's initial decision in September of 2020, somebody sent us this new eyewitness account, a video clip of a New York One reporter. We had just submitted the appeal, and I was like, shucks, I really would have liked to have included that. Let me play it for you.
Possibility that the fire was going to get worse. All of a sudden, a loud, incredibly loud explosion, and we have the video to show you.
All right, so that was the first time I had ever seen that clip. An actual reporter for New York One saying that there was a loud, incredibly loud explosion when Building 7 went down. So we deliberated for a couple months and decided to go ahead and make a supplemental submission to NIST with that new eyewitness account, because it was consistent with the arguments that we were already making in the request for correction, that there were eyewitness reports of explosions. We thought that they would consider it because it was totally relevant. We actually submitted that in December. And then in December, I finally heard back from the cameraman who the reporter named in the video, because I tried to contact him. I wanted to confirm who this reporter was. And I figured out who she was. He told me who she was. And I found her contact info, emailed her, and she emailed me back. Her name is Gigi Stone Woods. And she wrote in her email, all I remember is that we were reporting near Building 7, heard a loud explosion and people yelling to run, and we all did. So she confirmed her account, and we then contacted NIST again in January saying, hey, we know who it was. This is her contact info. You should interview her. And this was about 6 months before NIST responded with their final decision on the request for correction. In their final letter in June of 2021, this is what they had to say about that. Since the supplemental information and the additional emails were submitted well beyond the 30 calendar days from August 28, 2020, they were excluded from the record. However, for the same reasons explicated below, had they been considered by NIST, they would not have altered NIST's decision on the appeal. I wonder why they didn't include them if they could just be explained away like the rest of the evidence. So what are the reasons that they explicated below? This is the closest thing that we have to an explication from NIST. Further in the letter, they say, the requester appellant's approach has many differences with the approach taken by NIST. These differences include the methods used to collect and analyze first-person accounts, like contacting the witnesses and asking them what they witnessed. Due to these differences, the resulting outcomes from the requester appellant's approach do not have an impact on NIST findings. So that was their explanation. I want to quickly just point out, people are going to be familiar with the Barry Jennings account. People may be less familiar with Michael Hess, who was with Barry Jennings in the building. So I'm just going to play his video really quickly.
Yes, I was. I was up in the emergency management center on the 23rd floor, and when all the power went out in the building, another gentleman and I walked down to the 8th floor where there was an explosion, and we've been trapped on the 8th floor with smoke, thick smoke all around us for about an hour and a half.
Okay. So NIST's story is that these two gentlemen started to leave. We're on the 23rd floor in the Emergency Operations Center and started to leave that floor around 9:59 when the South Tower collapsed, and that it took them, but that the event that they witnessed, the explosion, as they were described it, was actually just the collapse of the North Towers, debris from the North Tower impacting Building 7. Well, that occurred at 10:28. So how do they leave the 23rd floor at 9:59? It takes them 29 minutes or thereabouts to descend only 14 to 16 floors. That's something like almost 2 minutes a floor. So really, their timeline doesn't make any sense. There's no way that Barry Jennings and Michael Hess got down to the 8th floor anywhere close to 10:28. It would have been much earlier, like 10:10 or so. We raised this issue in the request for correction. This was NIST's only response. So we now know for a fact that NIST cannot, that has no answer with their account of what happened to Michael Hess and Barry Jennings. NIST disagrees with the assertion that it distorted eyewitness reports of an explosion occurring inside WTC 7. The rescue events documented in NC Star 1-9, section 652 are based on 8 independent interviews. That's all they wrote. I thought that when I started reading that, I thought that they would elaborate on what they found in those interviews, but they didn't. So they did not explain how it took Jennings and Hess 29 minutes to descend, roughly 16 floors. Lastly, big takeaway for people to know is that NIST refused to examine the steel that is still at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And because we claim that they should examine the steel and that they should run experiments to try to reproduce the sulfidation and intergranular melting, which John Cole also ran those experiments in his backyard some 12 plus years ago and found that that would not occur. We thought NIST should do the same. We thought NIST might have some interesting excuse for explanation for what happened to that steel, because actually no one has provided a valid explanation. This was NIST's reason for not examining that steel. In the absence of a method to confirm that the FEMA 403 sample 1 that was tested at WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, is in fact steel from WTC7, there's no justifiable basis for conducting further analyses to examine other theories that explain the cause of the erosion in the sample. So in other words, they're saying we don't know for sure that steel came from WTC7, so there's no justifiable basis for conducting further analyses. First of all, if it were a real, genuine, legitimate investigation, they would conduct that. They would examine that steel no matter what, even if there was a 50% chance it was from Building 7 or a 25% chance. Examine the steel. But beyond that, pretty much every scientist, engineer who has studied this piece of steel at WPI or elsewhere believes that it came from Building 7. That was uncontroversial until NIST made it controversial with their refusal to examine the steel. And I'll just play one very short clip, and then we'll be about
In
done.
New England, the claims of the mysterious melted steel from Tower 7 has been unraveled. It was found by fire protection engineer Professor Jonathan Bonnet in a salvage yard.
It came from a much larger beam. This was the size of steel that they used in the construction of Tower 7. They didn't use this particular kind of steel in Towers 1 or Towers 2. So that's why we know its pedigree.
All right, so no question that the steel came from Building 7, but NIST says we're not going to investigate it because we don't know for sure that it came from Building 7. All right, so the big takeaways, just to summarize, the entire Building 7 roof line entered freefall simultaneously and instantaneously. NIST's stage 1 is completely made up. Number 2, the NIST model in no way, in no respect, matches the observed behavior. We showed this by taking a real close look at their model. NIST refuses to interview a confirmed WTC7 explosion witness, whose contact information we provided to NIST. Number 4, NIST has no answer for the Jennings-Hess timeline issue. And number 5, NIST refuses to examine WTC7 steel based on the false and unscientific ground that we don't know for sure it's from WTC7. If you want to look at some of the other things that, some of the big takeaways from this whole request for correction process, you can go to ae911truth.org/NIST. We have a series that has been started, a 5-part series. We've written 2 parts of so far called, what is it called? NIST confirms that its Building 7 report is undefensible. So take a look at that. In the first couple parts, we examined the more technical engineering side of things with the initiating mechanism. So thank you very much.
Well, Ted, thank you very much for that astonishing analysis. That's the best way I can describe it. Every time you come back with one of these reports or papers or whatever, you find all these facts that completely refute what NIST says. And I think a big problem for them is that you've got an event that was so globally covered that you can find these observable facts all throughout the coverage of that day, all throughout the reports, that all they can really do is just look the other way, almost like a mobster with a really good lawyer. But the thing is, it almost sounds kind of funny. Like they say that, we don't know that the steel came from World Trade Center 7. And then here's Ted playing a clip of them saying it came from World Trade Center 7, but it's not funny because they're playing games with a murder investigation that took thousands of lives. So that's why what you're doing is so important. And of course, what everybody else here tonight is presenting is so important as well. So thank you for bringing this to our audience here tonight.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, so we are going to be bringing Roland Engel back on. He's our CEO here at AE 911 Truth, and he's going to be joined by Scott Grainger. Now, Scott Grainger is a board member here at AE 911 Truth. He is a civil and fire protection engineer licensed in several states. He was a resident engineer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and he ran his own engineering firm for many years, specializing in fire protection engineering, fire and building code consulting, and forensic engineering. So he really knows his stuff when it comes to this subject. He graduated from Colorado State University with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, and they're going to be talking about AE 911 Truth's Building 7 pre-collapse study. So I'm going to leave the stream. We're going to get their visual aid up in just a moment, but guys, go ahead and get started. Oh, and I'm not hearing Roland. Roland, just make sure you're not on mute.
Sorry. Got it.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Last year, we went specifically on a search for a fire protection engineer. And of course, one of the first persons that we thought of was Scott, because he's done so much for our investigation process in the past. And he really has the credentials to investigate a subject that we've been wanting to look at more closely for a long time. And that is what happened in regard to the fires in Building 7. And the reason why this question is so important is because NIST claims that it was the fires that brought the building down. And of course, that's never happened before in the history of high-rise steel frame buildings. So that is an extraordinary claim, and it needs extraordinary proof to back it up. We want to look, we had Professor Halsey conduct a study on the collapse of the building itself, and Professor Halsey, in order to try to replicate their results, he took the fire information that NIST provided, and he used that as the input for the thermal effect on his structure. However, in looking at the information as we went through that process, we came to realize that there's a lot wrong with the fire thermal input load that NIST put on the structure. So Scott and Professor Halsey are now going to embark upon a thorough study of what happened to Building 7 starting at 6:47 that morning when the fire alarm system was turned off and put on test mode until the building came down at 5:20 in the afternoon. So Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got an outline here of the areas of investigation you're going to have to go through with Professor Halsey in regards to the fires at Building 7. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, Roland. It's been my experience in forensic engineering, and I've done a lot of loss investigations related to fire sprinkler systems, alarm systems, all types of fire separations, that the detail in the report needs to start early. In other words, it always works well if you get a history on the building and what's been going on in it. In this case, we're starting at, as Roland mentioned, early in the morning. At that point, the fire alarm system was put into a test mode. Why? Who did it? We don't know, but we'll find out. By putting it in test mode, that meant that anything else that was done in the building, almost, related to the fire sprinkler systems, any other fire suppression systems, and the fire alarm systems, if they were disabled for some reason, would not create an alarm condition. And in other words, the fire department wouldn't respond because the system was in test mode. That's the reason you put something like that in, so you can actually test it. But it also could be used to take the system basically out of service and not create a condition where someone would come out to see how come you've taken the sprinkler system out of service in building 7 in this case. And there's a lot of data that's important to this kind of an exercise, but I want to back up a little bit and remind everybody that one of the prime goals of AE 911 Truth has always been to get an independent investigation into the failures of all 3 towers. Well, the current the current evaluation of the structural collapse of WTC7 is very close to being just that for the World Trade Center 7. And in that case, AE 911 Truth did it. They went to the University of Alaska and contracted with them to do the investigation and evaluation. And now we're going to, I think, finish that investigation for WTC7 pretty much with this report that we're working on now related to the fire sprinkler systems, fire suppression systems, and fire alarm systems. So with that, when we finish this, I think we will be fully 1/3 of the way done with our original goals as far as the collapses. And I rather imagine that when, with your support, as Roland mentioned earlier, obviously for some of this kind of work, it takes some finances, and we appreciate very much your financial support and your support otherwise. Not everybody has to give money in order to provide support for the organization. So anyway, getting back to this outline, we really don't know at this point very much at all about the fire suppression systems within the building. And this is all about WTC7, so I got to keep that in mind. There were a number of fires in the building on various floors, lower floors. It's a 47-story building. And the fires that occurred were down between approximately floor 7 through 13. And that's a long ways from the top of the building. And the fires traveled around various portions of the different floors. They traveled in different directions, and depending upon which floor you were looking at. And typically, well, historically, for design of suppression systems, you've got one fire in the building. Pick a place for the fire, and the system's designed to suppress it. If you start adding more fires, the system's going to have a little bit of a problem suppressing the fire, but that rarely occurs. And the damage, minimal damage to WTC7 from flying debris from towers 1 and 2 at this point doesn't appear to have been significant enough to have caused some of the fires that we've got to deal with, particularly since some of the fires don't appear to have even started. on the side of the building where any damage occurred. So we've got to put all that together in a timeline by floor, and at the same time be investigating what happened to the water supply, supposedly. NIST report says that there was no water for WTC-7. Well, we have on-the-ground interviews, reports from fire department officials stating that yes, there was water available, but there wasn't any water in the building. Why had the system been shut down? We don't know yet, and we don't know who may have done it, but the issue really is why the fact that there was no water, but there was the water available, contrary to what NIST says. Again, the NIST report is in significant question on that point. We're looking for information on the sprinkler system themselves, any kind of piping details, drawings that we might be able to get. And the next item in the list here, item 5, is the combustible fuel that was in the building. This was an office building. It wasn't a storage facility for highly combustible materials. It had the normal desks and chairs and filing cabinets and so forth, and stacks of paper on people's desks and so forth. Those kinds of materials simply don't normally develop enough heat to create the damage that NIST claims occurred in the steel. So we have to look at that. That's already been looked at by NIST, and in some portions of the Halsey report, but we're going to do a little more investigation related to that so that we can maybe more effectively put that to bed. And other various items besides the combustibility, what was in it, structural fireproofing of the steel. We have indications that the steel was fireproofed. NIST claimed that it wasn't. And then we have in item 7, the questions on fire travel, where the fires were traveling around on the floors. That's not a normal condition. And we did have some windows in place. And we know which directions the wind was blowing that day. And that doesn't jive necessarily very well with how the fires were traveling inside the building, and the fact that the fires would come back to areas where they had already burned. That is very irregular. So what we need to find more information about what happened inside the building as best we can. And we do have 2 individuals that were actually in the building, and we're getting more information associated with that. And that's where we are going with this. It is part of our plan to finish the analysis, the independent analysis of WTC-7, and then start an independent analysis on towers 1 and 2. Because it seems that that's what we're going to do. We need a lot of support for that. And it does not have to just come from within the U.S. We have many people outside the U.S. who've been very supportive, and will continue to ask for more support. I think with that, I've given you an outline of what we're going to be doing in regards to WTC-7 for the next considerable period of time.
All right, thanks, Scott, and good luck to you and Professor Halsey with your work. And I know we'll be looking forward to those results, and they're very important to our analysis of what happened to Building 7. When you're done, I think we'll have a very complete picture of what happened to the building that day from the beginning until the point that it collapsed, and that's what we really need.
That's our goal, and Professor Halsey and I are working together on that now.
All right, good luck. Thank you.
Hey,
thanks.
Yeah, and Scott, I just wanted to ask, I wanted to ask if I can just get a question. I just want to boil it down a little bit. So is it your hypothesis that the water was turned off intentionally?
No, not necessarily. And I don't have a hypothesis to start with. We're investigating. I think the way I do my work in forensic engineering, I look at the facts and start piecing them together and start finding a route through the material that is valid, the material that we can that are confirmed by eyewitnesses and whatever else, without an initial hypothesis. I think that was one of the gross errors that NIST made. They started out with a hypothesis and they tried to prove it, and that's a big mistake. That's not forensic engineering.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, guys, for all of your work and everybody that's on here tonight. It's just excellent, all the information that we are getting. So we are going to move on and remove everybody here to a new segment of the evening. We have gone over the facts with you. We have gone over all of the science, which, again, we have been doing for a number of years. We've got so many official stories, silver bullets out there. I mean, the case has been proven a long time ago in my book, at least justifying a new investigation. And I know a lot of the diehards are on tonight watching these presentations, picking up new information. I'm one of those diehards, and I'm picking up new things here this evening that we're going to be looking at a little bit more in depth, probably, on 9/11 freefall in the coming year. But we got to reach everybody out there. We got to reach the Walmart shoppers. We got to reach the people who are not watching this presentation tonight. So please share this after it is over. But we do it on our end through films, documentary films, and we're always reaching new people in that way. Some people flipping through Amazon or Netflix and those places, or even just on YouTube looking for films to watch. They'll say, hey, this is interesting. It's about 9/11. And suddenly we have a new person in the movement as a result of that. So practically every year we are putting out new films. Last year we had The Unspeakable. We previewed that around the anniversary. This year the film is 30 Seconds of Silence. And the film is still being put together, edited, so that will be coming out very soon. But we wanted to give you guys a sneak peek tonight. So that is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be playing a series of 3 clips from this film. I'm going to withhold my opinion on it until it's over. But we're going to be playing those 3 clips. And then after that, we're going to be coming back and we're going to have a Q&A session with the filmmaker, Dylan Avery, and John Cole, who you're going to see is in the film, very prominent in it. And don't forget, we're going to be announcing a new special project at the end of the night. We're going to hold you in suspense to find out what that is, but it's going to be very exciting. I already know what it is, but I know everybody out there in the 9/11 Truth Movement is going to be very unique. So stick around for that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove myself from the stream. And the next thing you're going to see are the clips from the film. Again, that is 30 Seconds of Silence. It's from Dylan Avery.
Firefighters routinely would rush into Steele buildings to help save the people or put out the fire because they knew Steele buildings do not globally collapse due to fire. And yet, on 9/11, we're told that 3 of them came down from office fires alone in the same day. We rarely, if ever, see what happened in those 30 seconds. So it's that 30 seconds that I like to focus on to find out what really happened to those 3 buildings that came down that day. Without constant upkeep, first of all, we have to constantly maintain a system in order to keep nature from taking it over. So then you need to paint the steel, you need to do a whole bunch of maintenance on buildings. But nature also tells a story. Nature is only going to do what it's going to do, and it's going to be repeatable for every particular setup. And it'll do it every single time, even though you may want it to do something else. That's why they're called laws. We have yet to be able to defy those laws. No matter how you feel, if your feelings are hurt over it, I'm sorry, it's secondary, because the laws of physics are the boss. John Cole, or Jonathan Cole, some people know me by. I've been doing civil engineering since 1979, and I got registered in 1983. So from 1983 to 2022, this is today. So what's that, almost 40 years, close to it? Yeah, long. Without constant upkeep, first of all, we have to constantly maintain a system in order to keep nature from taking it over. So then you need to paint the steel, you need to do a whole bunch of maintenance on buildings. But nature also tells a story. Nature is only going to do what it's going to do, and it's going to be repeatable for every particular setup. And it'll do it every single time, even though you may want it to do something else. That's why they're called laws. We have yet to be able to defy those laws. No matter how you feel, if your feelings are hurt over it, I'm sorry, it's secondary, because the laws of physics are the boss. John Cole, or Jonathan Cole, some people know me by. I've been doing civil engineering since 1979, and I got registered in 1983. So from 1983 to 2022, this is today. So what's that, almost 40 years, close to it? Yeah, long time. Was it Plato who says, he that is most hated is he who tells the truth? It's resisted automatically, because you're going against what, quote, everybody knows. A Prior to 9/11, no steel-framed building had ever fallen globally like those 3 buildings did on 9/11. Firefighters routinely would rush into steel buildings to help save the people or put out the fire because they knew steel buildings do not globally collapse due to fire. And yet, on 9/11, we're told that 3 of them came down from office fires alone in the same day. So NIST started looking at this. I can almost be a fly on the wall. I can almost imagine those engineers sitting around a table. I can imagine saying, I don't really want to look at that thing because when you see that thing, it's being blown up and brought down. And how are we going to justify that? And I can almost imagine the response being told by their higher ups that, look at guys, don't even worry about it. We got a way around this. We're not going to talk about what happened when it started going down, so you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to put your license on the line. We're only going to talk about this just before that happened, so we're going to ignore all that critical evidence. So don't worry about that. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to compartmentalize the investigation here. We're going to spread this thing out. So you're only responsible for a very small portion of it, so you can feel comfortable as an engineer saying that, yeah, this is what happened when you have temperatures or trusses or the plane impacts. We're going to compartmentalize that as we build this whole report and put it together. The third thing we're going to do is we're not going to make you take any responsibility. You're not going to have to sign and seal it. You know, I'm an engineer. I've signed and sealed hundreds, if not thousands, of documents over the years. It's a way to put your own responsibility on something. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% correct, but it does have a responsibility as far as how that report was put together under whose direction. But don't worry about this because nobody's going to sign and seal this. Nobody's taking responsibility. And the last thing we're going to do is all this work that we're going to do, it's not going to have any value. Why? We're going to put a disclaimer right in the front. And that disclaimer, no part of any report resulting from a NIST investigation into the structural failure or from investigation under the National Construction Safety Team Act may be used in any suit or any action for damages arising out of any matter mentioned in such report. So we're out. We have no liability. You engineers don't have to worry about signing and sealing anything. Nobody's going to take responsibility. And we're not going to look at the key evidence. So we're all good. We're going to let the media tell the story. We're going to bring you up to that point of global collapse, and then we're out. Again, I don't know if that's what happened, but that's the end result of what happened.
Great way to cap it off there with that final clip. I think John summarizes it best. The entire situation, the entire cover-up, and just the lack of liability from our government institutions to account for the greatest mass murder in our country's history. So we're going to be talking about that film you just watched, yet to be released, but they are working on it right now. It's going to be coming out soon. And we're going to be joined by 2 people who are involved with it. Of course, the first one is Dylan Avery. Dylan is a producer and director known for Olsen, Asteroid, Black and Blue 7, The Unspeakable, a lot of other movies as well, and a little film called Loose Change, which opened the eyes of people all around the world to the problems with the 9/11 official story, kind of got the ball rolling for much of this movement, and was responsible for a lot of people being here tonight and being part of this important cause. He's now editing the film that you just watched. It's called 30 Seconds of Silence, which, of course, is being produced by AE 9/11 Truth. So let's go ahead and get Dylan in there. And where's John? Where is he? Oh, there he is. So he's going to be joined by John Cole, who we heard from earlier tonight, and who, as you just saw, appears prominently in the film. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on to our anniversary event this evening.
Thank you, Andy. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine. John, sound test.
Awesome.
Yep. Thank you.
Right. All right. Very good. Very good. We've been doing pretty good tonight. We had a little issue with the clip there, but that wasn't as big of a deal overall.
Can we give a little bit of context on those clips?
Absolutely. Well, actually, what I wanted to say is one of these was considered a teaser, and I want to say that I am thoroughly teased. The whole point is to intrigue people and want them to know more of what it's supposed to be about. So please, in the context, however you want to, go ahead and give us a summary of what this film you're bringing to us is going to be conveying.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, that first little clip was a little teaser. We were supposed to have it out a little bit earlier, but I imagine we'll be releasing that publicly soon. And then the clip after that is actually kind of the first couple minutes of the movie. After that, it's supposed to go into introducing actually Tony into the movie, Tony Zamboni, who you saw briefly in the teaser. There's a lot of structural things to kind of figure out. And then after that clip that you saw of John so eloquently describing the being the hypothetical fly on the wall at the walls of NIST. So that's a little clip from later on in the movie, and I just wanted to get a little bit something else for you guys to see. But yeah, you know, it's my third official project with AE, and yeah, we keep finding new ways to kind of, I don't want to say revisit the same material, but we always find new ways of approaching it and new places to go and new people to talk to. John has been a lovely surprise. So yeah, I wish I had more to say. I unfortunately don't have much to say.
Well, you say a lot through your art, and we're going to get into some of the aspects of it because it personally fascinates me. I've never seen a case in history where you have to just make it such an overwhelming case for something that is absolutely obvious, and we're always coming up with new information. As John brought it here tonight, talking about the top block and the spire and all of his research. So we just keep on having to find new angles, new ways to get this information out. That's why these films are so important, because that's what reaches the people, as I was saying earlier, who aren't as initiated to this information as the audience is this evening. John, I'm just going to ask you a very simple question. I know it's strange for anyone to be interviewed and then see yourself in such a cinematic way with mood music and all of that. So I'm just going to ask you for your very first reaction to those clips, especially the ones with you in it.
Yeah, it was that was the first time I saw him, Andy. I can tell you, I put together some videos over the years. It started 10 years ago, and mine looked like a 5-year-old did it compared to Dylan's ability there. I thought it was awesome, to be honest with you. Mine are funky and unbelievable how nice he put that together. So I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it was awesome from what I could see.
That's mostly the skills of Ryan, the DP. I just kind of cut it together. But yeah. Thank you, appreciate it.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
I'm glad John said that, because this happens synergistically on Freefall all the time. Some people say something that perfectly leads into the next question, but I remember, and I've been around since 2006 when my jaw first stopped seeing this information, and I was happy to have those very cheaply produced videos from so many people who just kind of put things together either with their webcams or whatever early kind of video camera that they had that they could hook up to their computer, because it was all about the information. And you'll notice that a lot of films that the 9/11 Truth movement sort of knows by heart at this point were very information oriented, very bare bones. And we owed a debt of gratitude to all the people who made those films, like films like ours, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, where it's just like, okay, here's this person, here's what they have to say about it, and that person. And a lot of them were just like presentations that people would put on as well. But Dylan, from what I have seen, and I don't work with you on the films, but I know what goes on, it's like you're leading the way in what I call the second generation of 9/11 truth films. They're more artistic, more cinematic. I see a lot of symbolism and stuff. I just want to know, for you personally, what has led you into this kind of direction with this information?
Well, and that's actually something that we can probably talk more about in this next little segment once we bring on Kelly and we talk about our little surprise that we have brewing. But I don't know, a lot has changed with me, both personally and professionally, since Loose Change. I mean, like, I've made actual films. I've directed narrative feature films now, so like I have done a lot of things that I didn't do before. And that is kind of the nice thing about it, is that like by doing these projects for AE, like I'm able to hire like my DP Ryan from Los Angeles, and I'm able to hire a sound man, and I'm able to rent out this really cool abandoned building in Philly and do it officially, and let a camera crew and some talent loose in it, and just kind of have some fun, but still try to find a way to tie it together and tell a story with it. So yeah, it's just kind of where I'm at. And I mean, it's funny that like you say that I'm leading the second generation of 9/11 truth films, but it's just like, geez, man, like, I mean, I already kind of had my say with the first generation. I don't need to lead the second generation too. But I mean, like, it's just kind of where I'm at now, really. It's like these, I can't just make a documentary now by like just cutting together a bunch of like archival footage, like I need to get out and I need to shoot something and I need to do interviews and I need to try to find ways to like get cool footage and, like repeat. Well, I hate to say repeat the same things again, because again, there are like new things and new discussions and new angles on it all being discussed and brought up all the time. But, it's like, I'm trying to find new ways of getting both the old audiences and potential new audiences interested at the same time, if that makes sense.
That is important, and everybody evolves too in whatever their craft is, and it's sort of like painters. You look at somebody like Francisco de Goya, and he would have different periods, and some stuff would be kind of basic, just basic nature and all of that, and then some of them were really horrific when he was going through a particularly difficult time. And I love to see that, and that's what I love about the arts, is you get an expression of the person who is behind it as well, and an insight into what's going on with them. Now, it's a little off topic from what we're talking about, but I can see that happening with this. And even though you're kind of leading the new generation, I want other people to be inspired by you. I want new kinds of content about this topic out there, with people adding their own kind of personal taste to it as well. So, John, turning back to you, I love what you said about nature in one of these clips, and it reminds me of this meme that I saw on Facebook. I think I actually posted it, and what it did is it showed this mall and this escalator, and it's just overgrown with nature, with trees and shrubs and weeds. It looks like people abandoned this mall a long time ago, and the caption under it says, "In the end, nature always wins." And that is absolutely true. I mean, even if mankind manages to blow up the planet, you still have the universe to contend with. The nature, mankind will never overcome that. Those are my thoughts on that, but I think the audience is more interested in yours. So can you elaborate on those thoughts that you expressed in those clips?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I focused on, I mean, there's so many pioneers and greats in this movement. Stephen Jones, David Ray Griffin, Kevin Ryan, David Chandler, all those guys were some of the pioneers and some of the greats. Gordon Ross, who's an unsung hero in my mind in England, he did a fantastic video back in 2006 or something like that. And so they did a lot of mathematical proofs on this, just like NIST and Bazant is trying to do mathematical proofs. So when I started looking at this thing, I wanted to take a little bit of a different angle when I started getting into this. And so in 2010, I wanted to take the experimental angle, because experiment is nature. And I've got some quotes in my videos, Richard Feynman says it doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is or how smart you are. If it disagrees with nature, then it's wrong. I mean, that just cuts, it just cuts right to the chase of things. No matter how complicated those mathematical equations are, if it doesn't match what nature said is happening, I'm sorry, you're out. And so that's the angle I try to take through this thing. And that's really what I'm saying. When I say nature, I mean nature's laws, physical laws, laws of physics that again are proved through experiment. And so many people, I think even going way back to Bacon, I think he had a saying, the strongest arguments prove nothing so long as the conclusions are not verified by experiment. So I don't know. I think we're on a journey here, and one of the giants that we have on our side. We're small. We don't have all the power that the government has in NIST, and we're just a bunch of little guys here. But we've got this humongous giant right behind us, and that giant is the laws of physics and the laws and nature's laws. So without that giant, would be nothing. But I mean, we're on the winning side. In the long run, we're going to be proved right.
Yeah. I always say that after 9/11, physics and common sense became a conspiracy theory. I mean, anytime you question something, if you smell gas and want to call the gas company and make sure you don't have a gas leak, you're a conspiracy theorist now. But what I love about AE 9/11 Truth, in particular, out of all of the different 9/11 Truth groups, is our focus on the science. Not only because it's just the most common sense, but it's also the hardest to argue with, and it's the easiest to defend. So when you are talking to the general public, when you're talking to media, whoever, and this is advice to the audience out there, going with our information is the easiest route to go because they really can't argue with it. Typically, they will scoff. They will try to talk in circles around you, or you see, as Ted was talking about earlier with NIST, they just throw up their hands and try to do everything that they can to hide from any accountability on this. And that's when you have them on the run. And the only thing that we're running now into now is a sociological problem and, of course, a cover-up. So, Dylan, I'm going to turn back to you because, again, I am interested in the artistic aspect of this. One of the things that stood out to me in one of the clips, and I can't remember the order they were in and all of that, but was the dead butterfly on the windowsill. I know with film and stuff, you show up somewhere and some of the stories behind it are circumstantial, like, hey, that's pretty cool. But talk about overall your use of symbolism with imagery and how are you utilizing that in your storytelling in this film?
So real quick, on the dead butterfly, it's interesting because I was actually, I was going back through some of Ryan's shots like that earlier today. And it turned out that he had gotten a shot of that butterfly on the ground, and then he actually moved it up onto the windowsill to that shot that you saw in the teaser. Because I was watching that shot, and I was just like, was that butterfly actually there, or did Ryan put it there? And then going through footage today, I got my answer. He did in fact stage that. Yeah, I mean, I there's the shot of the butterfly, and either I believe right before it or after it is the shot of the leaves up in the window, and it's kind of like a life-death thing, and I don't know, I've been kind of going through a lot of both of those things myself. I don't know, not to go off into a weird thing on this show, but I don't know about other people, but I myself and a lot of the people that I know have been having a very intense summer, really emotional, kind of a roller coaster with a lot of highs and a lot of lows, a lot of life and a lot of death and a lot of marriages and a lot of breakups and just a lot. It's really just been kind of an intense summer. And so maybe that's kind of coming through in that teaser that I made too, where I'm just I'm really kind of feeling a lot of those emotions, but I mean, I'm not trying to make things selfishly too, but I do feel that it does kind of fit within the theme. And also, again, John tied it together beautifully because I asked him to give me a nice little speech about nature and to kind of tie it together with the theme of the movie, if he could at the end. And of course, he did so beautifully in one take, so it was great. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of somewhat lost my train of thought on that, but like I said, I've been kind of dealing with a lot personally lately, both good and bad, and so I guess I'm kind of maybe somewhat using some of this as an outlet, but again, I'm also trying to be true to the message and true to what we're making, and also, like I said, still trying to kind of move the presentation forward and try to do something different, and at the very least, when people see it, they know it makes an impression on them and it stands out, if nothing else, I suppose.
Well, this is what I love about these creative works because, okay, we have the subject matter. It's the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence. We we beat the drum on this all the time, but when you pick somebody to kind of portray it in a way, and I've seen this with comics, I've seen this with films and stuff, you pick somebody and it's kind of like going through the filter of them, not on the information, but on their worldview, how they see the world. That's why I love the early silent films from the Europe and Germany and all of those things, because they really utilize that a lot. And I feel like we've lost that to a certain extent, except with like David Lynch films and all of that. John, in one of the segments here, I see that you are walking up to what appears to be a 9/11 memorial piece crafted from some of the steel that was there from Ground Zero. Describe what that was like for you, especially with a camera following you.
Yeah, so in Philadelphia, like a lot of cities, there is a memorial that's down by the river, kind of underneath the bridge down by the river. And it's an actual piece of the World Trade Center tower. You could see those shear studs that were welded on the top of it. And it's actually set into a piece of concrete, a little bit of an angle. And around the four sides of it, there's basically, it's a circle, but with four quadrants, there's a name of somebody who lived in Philadelphia that died in those towers. And so, like I said, a lot of times you have to set aside the things that Mr. Campbell's going through right now. You have to set aside all those people who were literally blown up, exploded into pieces. I mean, it's just, and so it's those moments. I set those aside when I try to do my science stuff, because you have to. It's those moments when I started walking up to that steel that it really brings it back full circle, full loop to like, wow, this is what this is all about. These people perished. Who knows if they even have the bodies back on this? And so that memorial kind of ties things all back to me, back to the human aspect of this thing, and away from the scientific aspect of it. So it's a nice closure, if you will, when I started walking up to that memorial.
Yeah, it's really difficult sometimes to separate the human aspect from the scientific. It becomes easier, and I can't speak for you, but I mean, it becomes easier as you kind of just do this every day. But then it becomes like you look at the data and you have to be reminded sometimes as to why this is so important. And we do that every year, of course, because it becomes easy to just look at it as numbers and graphs and things like that. But then you are faced with something like a memorial or a picture of somebody that died on that day. And I mean, this is what I loved about The Unspeakable too, is because it actually went into Bobby McIlvaine's bedroom. You hear his story. Bobby McIlvaine, of course, was killed as he was entering the North Tower that morning, and his father Bob is going through the bedroom. And I just think about all of the books that weren't written because of 9/11, because Bobby wanted to be a writer on that day. And there's so many stories just like that in those towers that we lost. People, all these lives lived, just suddenly wiped out. And of course, they deserve justice. They deserve to have the real reasons for their deaths told to the world. That's why we continue to do this. But it's where science meets the human element of this entire thing. So again, that's why I'm really excited about seeing this entire film. Dylan, what's the biggest takeaway you want the audience to get after watching this? What's the thesis, if that's even the proper word? But what do you want people feeling as they enter this and thinking about on their drives home?
This particular project right here that we're discussing?
Yes.
30 seconds of silence. I don't know. I mean, I think that I believe internally, like, the main goal is to express that, despite all the outcry and despite all the insistence from both mainstream media and from popular mechanics, it's really it's somewhat impossible for controlled demolition to have been debunked, because they never actually went past the point of collapse initiation. So NIST never actually explained how the towers came down. So it's kind of impossible for any kind of hypothesis about how the towers came down to be proven or disproven, because at least according to NIST, and at least according to what the official reports say, because there really is no official hypothesis about how the towers came down. They just made it to collapse initiation, and then kind of like dusted their hands, and then that was it. That's really kind of the main takeaway, but you know, there's going to be a lot of other things in there too. I don't know. I'm still working on it, so we'll see.
Yeah, no.
We'll see what the main takeaway is. But I mean, that's kind of like that's kind of the main goal.
Well, I'll tell you what, as I cited in another project, they stop at a collapse initiation, but what happened after collapse initiation is what took so many lives. Not just the people who died in the towers either, but all the people who got sick from breathing in the toxic air. And they sort of get, it seems like a lot, but they are sick as a consequence of those towers coming down, not because airplanes crashed into buildings, but because they actually came down, turned to powder practically in midair. So for them, this issue is just as important.
Not even the people in the buildings, the people around the buildings too.
Oh, around them. Yeah, exactly. So for that person who has to stop and take a few breaths just walking up the stairs, this issue is just as important as for the firefighters that died that day, and they deserve to know why they're sick. John, I'm going to ask a similar question to you, but I know you're not the filmmaker, you're an engineer, you focus on the science. Let's say other engineers decide to tune into this film, they watch it. What is the, I mean, I get that the whole 9/11 controlled demolition issue is just so vast, and we're constantly getting new information, new evidence. It's hard to cover it in just a half hour. I've tried to do that on radio shows, and it's just really tough. But what's the biggest thing that you want them taking away from this and thinking about as they go on their afternoon drive after watching this?
Just to piggyback on Dylan, and really what I think is the theme of the whole thing, and even, you know, and that is that the largest structural failure in world history, and the event that killed 2,800 people just in the towers and hundreds of thousands after years and years of study, the top experts in the world can't figure out how they came down. I mean, like Dylan said, I mean, it's how can you debunk something when there's nothing to debunk, because they couldn't figure it out. And we have all these private people trying to figure it out, throwing all these hypotheses out, none of which, of course, match experiment or nature. But again, I'm kind of recapping what Dylan said, is that they never told us. The media told us. So it's a pretty big embarrassment, I think, on our entire world scientific system. And then everybody out there is afraid to speak up or say anything because they're worried about losing their jobs or whatever. And so everybody's silent about it. But again, I'm just reiterating what Dylan said, is that we had the biggest mass murder in history, in U.S. history anyhow. And nobody in an official capacity can tell us what happened with the actual collapse. It's just unbelievable.
That's right, but they have a lot of confidence in trying to assert it. I don't think it's real confidence. It's a fake kind. Like they read some kind of self-help book on how to snow over an entire world on a very important event, and it's time to get past that. Again, we're not going away. We're not going to stop doing this. If they think they're going to ice us out and then we're just going to pack up and leave, I have no plans to do that anytime soon, and I'm sure you guys are not going to either. So we continue talking about this. We pick up new people all of the time who look at the contrast. I mean, one of the things that woke me up to this information wasn't even the science at first. It was the way the media reacted to very reasonable people. I'll use an example, Stephen Jones, you know, when they wouldn't let him show the Building 7 clip coming down on TV. They reacted very hostilely just to the questions being raised by what I perceived to be very reasonable people asking these things. And that kind of led me into getting into the nitty gritty. And I know that's happening with people all over the world. So the more they just put up these barriers and, try to protect this official story, they're really cutting their own throats in that sense, because people are waking up. And I have no doubt, again, that we are going to have an acknowledgement of this at some point. The sooner the better, in my opinion. I think it'll be better for the world. So guys, we got about 3 minutes left. I'm not going to ask you to belabor it, but I've been asking guests this on my show each week. It's the 21st anniversary. The 9/11 official story is old enough to buy a beer at this point. We began with a video talking about why 9/11 still matters to our supporters. in just a minute or so, starting with Dylan. Tell us why 9/11 still matters to you.
Well, I mean, we continue to live in the post 9/11 world, so it continues to be relevant because it continues to affect us on a daily basis. And there are now people who are in high school, graduating high school, entering college, potentially leaving college soon, who, for them, the post 9/11 world is just the world. And this is actually something, Andy, that we'll be talking about in our next segment, actually, our little surprise segment. But it continues to be relevant because it continues to affect us. And I continue having to take my shoes off at the airport and having to be treated very suspiciously because I don't want to go through the nudie scanner, and I'd rather just get a pat down. And then they have to search my hands for explosives. And then they get mad at me because I don't want to be searched for explosives, you know? Like, and that's just our life. And that's just what we put up with. And that's just the post 9/11 world. And for some people, that's just the world. And for me, that's not okay. And we're way too far gone to undo any of that stuff. But I don't know. That's why it still matters to me, because as much now as I've now spent more of my life in the post 9/11 world than I didn't, I do long for the times when I didn't. So that's it. That's all.
Yeah. TSA. I remember putting my suitcase one time, getting one of those TSA cards saying we searched your bag, and I had a whole bunch of beyond misinformations in there. I was traveling for some AE thing, and I'm like, good, I hope you kept one. I hope you read it all. And that this rifling through my belongings produced some fruit here in terms of outrage. John, same question. Why does 9/11 still matter to you?
Yeah, well, it matters to me because I've been into it for so long, but I think it should matter to the average person. I think what this is it kind of cracks the door open to events both before and since 9/11, because once you see 9/11, once you see that, it changes your worldview. Now, do I think we're going to get any justice out of 9/11? Probably not. Unfortunately, that's my personal opinion. As far as they were concerned, they're collateral damage to a bigger operation out there. But I think when people see this, when they see what happened, they're going to start questioning things that are going on today. There's a lot of events going on today that people from all over the political spectrum are questioning. And they can point to 9/11 as an example of some of the horrific things that governments can do to their own people. And if you use 9/11 as your stepping stone, you can also go back in history and you can see some other events in history that are extremely questionable as far as who was behind those events. So learning about 9/11 is very important. Maybe not that we're going to get much justice at this point, 21 years later, but to use it, again, as a stepping stone to both what happened in the past and what very well could be happening right now and in the future. So it's an important thing for, I think, everybody to take a look at this so they get it, so they see what governments can do to their own people.
Right. And you make people more vigilant too. I mean, that is just sort of I don't even want to say consolation prize, because I think it's huge. You know, you wake people up to this, they start distrusting what they hear more, it makes them smarter. And I have no doubt that in the end, I mean, this is going to be acknowledged, even if the government doesn't say it, it's going to be acknowledged 60 years down the road that, yeah, well, it's, some strong evidence that we were being lied to about why those towers came down. And we just got to keep on doing our work to make that happen. John, Dylan, thank you so much for your participation in this movie, for all of your work, and for coming here tonight. So we're going to let John relax now. I know he's been on a couple of times. He's going to sit back and watch the rest of the show. Again, the film is called 30 Seconds of Silence. When it's ready to be released, we're going to be sending bulletins out about that. And that's why you got to be subscribed to our emails, by the way. You can do that at ae911truth.org, because the New York Times is not going to report on it for some reason. I don't know why. But we will tell you about it, and you'll be able to purchase the film and know where to see it. All right, so we are at the very last segment of this event tonight. I have been enjoying listening to this information, at times getting a little angry because of how ridiculous this is, that we got to keep on bringing up new points on something that's already been proven a long time ago. But this has been a very valuable just experience for me and probably for people out there in the audience. So I have been talking a couple of times tonight about a new exciting project that AE 9/11 Truth is undertaking. And it's not something that we've done before, so that's supposed to intrigue you to let your mind start wondering, well, what's something AE hasn't done before? And we've been teasing this out all night. Well, for this announcement, we're going to be bringing on a very special guest. Where is she? There she is. We're bringing on Kelly David, and Kelly is the Chief Operating Officer here for AE 9/11 Truth. She also serves on the board. She has overseen many of the great things that have happened here at AE over the last 8 years. She operates behind the scenes, so we don't see a lot of her in our media. That is the audience's loss there, but we here on the staff and all the people who work with her see what she does, and we couldn't do this work without her. I mean, she's basically one of our biggest 9/11 Truth heroes here for the staff. And she's also proven to be an excellent producer, having served that role for our films such as Seven, The Unspeakable, and now for the film that we just talked about, 30 Seconds of Silence. But you know what? I got a feeling that she's not done yet with that role. So I'm going to sit back. I'm going to give Kelly the floor. Kelly, what is this big, exciting new project that AE is undertaking?
Okay. Well, most of you know, and if you don't know, you should check it out. Andy published a book, Born on 9/11, graphic novel. It's available in our online store. And Andy worked 4 years on that project, and I was with him all along the way and watching him mature. I mean, he's a brilliant writer. The story is brilliant, but he also taught himself to do the graphics for it as well. And all along he'd send me, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Kind of back and forth. And last year, while I was working on editing the book, Dylan and I were traveling for a shoot. And I was going through it, and I was thinking, man, this would make a great movie. It's a fictional story, but this is something that I think, would really resonate with regular people. And, the 9/11 Truth movement has never done a narrative before. We've made plenty of documentaries. AE 9/11 Truth has been around for 17 years now. We've done everything we could to try to reach as many audiences as possible. There are a lot of people out there who love graphic novels, and the reviews we've gotten on the novel itself, everyone loves it. So again, if you haven't read it, please do. It is excellent. And I kept telling Dylan, I think this would make an insane movie, but he was too busy making The Unspeakable, and the two of us just, really didn't have much time to talk about it. And finally, when Dylan had some time, he read it in like a couple of hours, and like less than 48 hours after that, he immediately said, this can be an insane movie. This will be a great narrative. Let me work on the script for it. And in like 48 hours, he had already sent me like a first draft of it. And I read it.
Well, of Act 1, not the whole.
Of Act 1, yes. I read that, and it blew me away because it just took the book to like the next level. I can imagine this movie. So what we really want to do is turn this novel into a narrative. And AE 9/11 Truth has never done anything like this before. So it's new, it's exciting. It's not going to be easy to do because we're going to have to cast people, and it's very different than what I'm used to, but Dylan has a lot of experience with this. And that is our next project if we are able to raise enough money for it. So that's the exciting announcement. Dylan, you have anything to weigh in on?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I don't want to discuss the strategy too much, but I mean, basically anyone who's familiar with the graphic novel, that most of it takes place starting on basically the 18th anniversary of 9/11 and kind of carries through from there. And then there's a little bit of a time jump, and then there's some scenes near the end that take place during the winter. And so I believe the plan with this initial hope for fundraising is that we raise enough to shoot some footage over this coming winter. One of the greatest things about the graphic novel is, like, once I read it and once I was talking to Kelly about it, I was like, well, I mean, a lot of this takes place in upstate New York. I mean, there's literally a panel in the graphic novel where they drive by the Otsego County sign, and I live in Otsego County. So it just seemed meant to be. And I mean, I feel like we've kind of consistently raised the bar with the productions that we've done together. And I don't know, a narrative, if we can pull it off, feels like the next logical step. Things like this have been kind of attempted in the past. There's like Who Killed John O'Neill? I remember that one from like 2004 or 5, something like that. There's been a couple narratives. Oh, there was one called The New Day in 2009. I'm actually in that one playing myself. That was interesting. But definitely nothing on this scale. Like, absolutely nothing on this scale. Again, anyone who's read the graphic novel, I don't want to spoil it. So if you haven't read it, you should. And so that's our hope. I don't want to speak too much about the strategy because it's not really my department. All I can say is that for the last couple of years, if no one's familiar, we've been kind of building a little bit of a narrative film empire in upstate New York, back in our hometown. In the last 2 years, we've made 3 feature films. I directed my first narrative feature film in August 2020. Our film that we did last summer just came out, Bring 'Em Back Dead. It has Gary Daniels, Daniel Baldwin in it. We just wrapped a movie here in May. We're not only making feature films here, but we're making them, I don't want to say for cheap, because that makes them sound bad. But we can take a little bit of money and we can make it go a long way. So however much the supporters want to support this, you will definitely see the money on the screen, because we are very good at making movies in upstate New York and having the money shown on the screen, and in surprising ways. So that's all I can say. I don't know. Again, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about this, but I am very excited about the idea, because I've gratefully had a lot of opportunities to make some really cinematic and really kind of next level stuff for AE, and I feel like this is the next logical progression of it. So that's it. That's all I got.
Well, I'm excited about it for obvious reasons, but also not just because it's my book that's turning into a movie, but also because, the reason I did the book in the beginning was because I felt like the 9/11 Truth movement needed its sort of narrative film to reach people. The general public, we've got a great audience tonight that is very interested in all of the science and everything that's being presented here and digging down right into the nitty gritty, but the general public is out there watching the Avengers, getting a tear in their eye when Black Panther walks through the portal and things like that. I know this because I'm one of them.
The Avengers.
But that's where the people. Yeah, the Avengers were. Most of the movies are pretty good, but we can have a discussion on that later. But most of the people, that's what they are into, and that's where they're getting their information. And as you see the propaganda being worked into narrative features like films, 24 was famous for this, and I've never actually watched 24, but I heard a lot about it when it was on, how it worked in the war on terror narrative into their shows, and really kind of helped to push the agenda that was being kind of pushed on us. This is where we need to be. We need to be on every single front, not just on the science, not just pursuing these professional organizations and NIST and getting our information out there, but we got to repackage all of the evidence for new audiences and make it interesting to them, to the people who may not find this interesting naturally.
I'm having
and
the same problem with mine. Like, don't worry about it.
I know I got these because I did not. Yeah, I did not want to have wires hanging from my ear, so I bought these wireless earbuds, and now I deal with them trying to run
I didn't
away
want to
with...
have my huge headphones on during the show, so I was like, let me use my Raycons, and I'm severely regretting this decision. So anyway, I'm sorry. Carry on.
Well, because I'm a very animated speaker, and I'm like, shaking my head and stuff, and I didn't realize how animated I was until I started doing
stay still so they don't fall out. So.
but no, that's where people are. And that's, we incorporated the controlled demolition evidence into the graphic novel, made it part of the story. I had cameos for certain prominent people in the movement. I did that by design, working that into the story, because we want to, I don't want to say trick, that's not the right word, but I want to have people get the evidence while also being entertained. So that is where we need to be. With this, we got to be on every single front. So I am very excited about that. Kelly, I guess it is for a conclusion to this tonight. Just outline what some of the challenges are going to be. You may have touched on that a little bit already, but just reemphasize how our supporters can help out.
Probably the biggest challenge will be the funding for it. So if our supporters could donate towards this project, that would be a huge help. The only other challenge I can see is that this will be my first time working on a narrative, but I've worked with Dylan long enough and I know a lot of what he does when he's working on narratives. So I kind of have a little bit of knowledge, but no experience.
You'll be fine.
Other than that, I think, that's about it.
Well, there you go. And when you finished Act 1, I remember I read it and then I got mad that it just ended suddenly. I wanted more of it at that time, but it's really good. And it's very similar to the book. Of course, no movie is exactly the same as the original source material, but in terms of opening scenes and all that, but it's the same story as far as I know. And we're going to be learning more as it develops. But the book is my book. It's Born on 9/11. I got my copy of it right here. If you want to get a sneak preview of what's going to be in this movie, we have the book at the AE911truth.org store. Just find it right on there and order it. We'll ship it right to you. Guys, thank you so much again for all of the work you're doing. I know what you do, Kelly. I see it every day. And Dylan, you're giving us these amazing films and these amazing new opportunities for the 9/11 Truth movement. I know your message is really resonating and getting out there. So thank you guys both.
Thank you, Andy.
No problem, man. Thank you.
All right. So, folks, we are at the end. That is the big, exciting announcement. Of course, there will be more information on the narrative film as time unravels here and we have more information. So, if you haven't subscribed to our emails, I said this before, I'm going to be a broken record. Subscribe again, AE911truth.org, and learn all the news about our developments, our projects, our outreach, everything that we do. I know how hard these people work. It's like night and day because the work itself is so important. And I want to thank everybody here in the 9/11 Truth movement. It's very difficult to conclude an event like this because there's just so much that's being presented. We start with the scientific information. New stuff that I learned tonight. That I didn't even see these presentations in the mad scramble to put on this event. And then we get into the film, a lot of the clips I hadn't seen yet, and now just this big announcement. It's hard to know how to wrap up all those different things. But I'll just say this. For me, the new year starts on September 12th. It's a personal thing. It's, I know that the new year starts on January 1st. That's what the rule is. That's what how the calendars are oriented. But for me, in my mind, a new year starts on September 12th because of so much of my work focuses on September 11th and a lot happens around the anniversary. And I know it's like that for a lot of people who are watching this as well. So I'm going to say, let's talk about it like it is the new year. Let's go into the new year with a brand new energy and excitement for 9/11 activism. Let's get this message out there and let's make this the year that we really make some major strides and get our message out into the mainstream. You can see we're doing our best and we're going down every single avenue that we can to put this out in the mainstream, but we are going to need your help. And it's only because of the help of our supporters that we can continue to do what we do here. So thank you for watching Forbidden Truth. I'm Andy Steele, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.